I think everyone has had to struggle.
I think they need to follow the rules.
I don't think everything needs to be about race.
I think the real problem is black on black crime.
I'm not racist.
I'm not racist.
October 1859. Dangerfield Newby was a former slave from the Shenandoah Valley. His wife and children were still enslaved there. Dangerfield had joined the abolitionist John Brown in a planned slave revolt with the hopes of setting them free.
Brown, a white tanner and ordained minister, had gathered an interracial coalition of freedom fighters to overthrow Harper's Ferry, Virginia, a federal weapons arsenal. His 22-man party prepared for a violent takeover. Their plan was to secure the weapons and distribute them to black slaves as they made their way from plantation to plantation, encouraging them to free themselves along the way. Within 2 days, the raid was put down by Colonel Robert E. Lee. Thomas Stonewall Jackson and Jeb Stuart were put on guard duty to keep watch over Brown. John Wilkes Booth stood as spectator to his execution. Dangerfield Newby was killed during the raid. His corpse was amputated and fed to hogs. He would never live to see his wife and children again.
Slavery is said to be an evil, but is no evil. On the contrary, I believe it to be the greatest of all the great blessings which a kind of providence has bestowed upon our glorious region. As a class, I say it boldly, there is not a happier, more contented race upon the face of the earth. Lightly tasked, well-clothed, well-fed, far better than the free laborers of any country in the world. Their lives and persons protected by the law, and all their sufferings alleviated by the kindest and most interested care.
Between 1850 and 1861, 4 more states entered the Union, each one opposed to slavery. The thin balance began to tip in favor of free labor. By 1860, the Republican Party platform was to prohibit the expansion of slavery into the West, although it still allowed slavery to continue in southern states.
November 1860. Abraham Lincoln becomes the 16th President of the United States. With the economic balance tipped already in favor of the North, his election confirmed the South's view of him as a threat. Nevertheless, Lincoln did not hold abolitionist views. His goal was only to save the Union.
If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that.
The South's response was secession.
Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest in the world. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce of the earth. These products are peculiar to the climate verging on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. We hold as undeniable truths that the governments of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, but they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior, independent race, and in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable.
April 12, 1861. The Southern Confederate States declared war on the United States to preserve and protect their economic engine. Union troops were quickly put on the defensive, forcing their hand to move toward the Mississippi River, securing the West.
While wealthy landowners conscripted soldiers to battle over which economic system should exploit the country, black people, either working or enslaved, took advantage of the chaos by making the Civil War a battle for their own liberation.
Severe losses climbed on both sides of the divide. The North became desperate for soldiers and laborers. Black people were increasingly seen as an asset, appreciating in value with each passing day of the conflict. Northern forces had declared them contraband of war.
As the Union Army pressed further south, more and more black slaves walked off plantations in a general strike. They joined Union Army camps asking to fight for the North. When it became clear that the Union Army would not return escaped slaves to their Southern masters, enslaved people argued that they should be able to work, spy, and fight for the North as stolen property. This move was critical to the success of the Union Army and would ultimately turn the tide of the war.
August 17, 1862. The Dakota people were starving due to competing white settlers moving westward into their territory, as well as the U.S. government being late on payments owed to them as a part of their treaty agreements. In the late summer heat, 4 indigenous hunters killed 5 white settlers in Acton Township, Meeker County, now central Minnesota. The Dakota had declared war on the United States. After 4 months of fighting, forced marches, imprisonment, and internment camps, 4,000 spectators gathered in Mankato, Minnesota on December 26, 1862. Abraham Lincoln ordered that 38 Dakota men be hanged.
January 1st, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation declared slaves free in areas still fighting against the Union, which it was very careful to point out. It also opened the Union Army to formally use black soldiers. The more blacks entered the war, the more it was deemed a conflict for their liberation. Countless thousands of whites had already lost their lives protecting the economic interests of white northern elites. Seeing the cause of their ultimate sacrifice shift toward the freedom and equity of black people was not what they'd enlisted for. Adding to their discontent, poor whites were drafted into the Union Army, while rich whites could buy themselves out of it for the price of $300. Draft riots broke out in 1863, uprisings of angry whites in northern cities. Their targets were not the rich whites who had bought their way out of the draft, rather their very own black neighbors. An orgy of death and violence poured out across the North to satisfy what white men deemed as wastefully shed blood for the liberation of black slaves. As the war raged on, the North held the advantage by more industrial might, the additional manpower of free blacks, and former Southern slaves. Southern forces had run out of everything, expending all manpower and exhausting all of their resources. The Confederacy was bankrupt.
April 9th, 1865. The South lay wasted. The North had deconstructed their entire economic system by force, both inside by slave informants and outside by liberated slaves who had bolstered Union forces. General Robert E. Lee surrendered to the Union Army at the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse. The national political power of slave owners had ended. National influence of wealthy Southern plantation owners had also ended. Northern industrialists secured economic expansion, free land, free labor, and a free market, which they pushed westward on the rails.
February 1866. Black freedmen and women would continue to take their own future into their hands as the fortunes of the reunited states moved west. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, more commonly known as the Freedmen's Bureau, was a U.S. government agency which directed basic necessities aimed to help freed people with their social, political, and economic transition to freedom. As black people claimed their rights as American citizens, the Freedmen's Bureau heard cases of freedmen and women being cheated out of their wages, the stealing of their crops, violent attacks, and even the murder of freed people who dared to see themselves as social or political equals to white Southerners.
Thousands of formerly enslaved black people searched for family members scattered through the domestic slave trade. They now built churches and educational institutions, pushed for land ownership and control of their own labor, all while facing increasing efforts from the southern plantation owners to re-establish social and economic relationships nearly identical to slavery. This highly skilled and newly self-emancipated people quickly established black-only towns and business districts in many states. They'd even secured no less than 1,500 government office positions across the nation. The period of Black Reconstruction became the Second American Revolution, fueling the efforts of African Americans as they continued to fight for their own full freedom and equality.